Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to maybe wait a couple of minutes before starting to let people join us, the ones that are a couple minutes late. So let's say about 2-3 minutes, 5 minutes tops before we start.
And the stream has started exactly at 2 p.m. as expected.
Yeah.
So we're live.
I pushed the button. All right, let's get started. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. This is the second time we're going to do this public project demo. It's the first time that we're streaming it live as well. So maybe there are some things that were probably not going to be perfect, but we hope everything is going to be all right. So my name is Pablo Borovic. I'm the VP of Core Engineering at PrestaShop, and I'm going to be your master of ceremony today to present 2 demos from the team. So what is this all about? So why are we doing these demos? So for years, we have held this kind of rituals at PrestaShop, but only employees were invited. And we thought that it would be interesting to let everyone be aware of what's happening in the project, since we're becoming more and more open about what we do, and in hopes of encouraging people to work with us. So we wanted to create a space for maintainers, both the ones that work for the PrestaShop company and the ones who are not employees of the PrestaShop company, to discuss and to share with the community and interact especially with the community. So this event, which is a video conferencing event that we're going to hold on a monthly basis, which is public as well. The idea is to show announcements, demos for the latest achievements from the core team, and have Q&A sessions at the end. So don't hesitate to add your questions on the chat on YouTube if you're following us live on YouTube. And yeah, if for some reason you end up showing up late, or you don't have the time to follow the live event, it's being recorded and it's going to be available on YouTube afterwards, so you can catch up later. So the agenda for today is the introduction that I just made. This agenda that I'm just reading out loud now. The rules, I'm going to remind you of what are the rules, and then we're going to follow by announcements and the two demos, and at the end, a short Q&A session. We're hoping not to go over the 1 hour that we agree for this event. Your reminder about the rules for this event. So remember to use the chat to ask questions. If you're joining us on the video conferencing room, remember to be muted. That's for the maintainers. This event is also about the open source project, not about the company. So company stuff is off topic. The event is public, so people are going to be watching it right now live and afterwards with the recording. And remember that every participant must abide by the code of conduct of the PrestaShop project, which is available at the link just below. Let's get started by the announcements. So we are announcing the release of 1772, the latest patch release. It's a little weird that you're not seeing the image. Well, it's just a banner. I see it. Anyway, so 1772 has been delivered a couple of days ago. This is the second patch release for the 177 branch. It fixes 21 regressions reported on 1770 and 1771. The image just showed it. And there are a couple fixes that strengthen the upgrade process from 1.6 to 1.7.7 as well. So we're hoping that people who were struggling to upgrade from 1.6 can now do it with less of a hard time. And it also includes 2 security patches. So let's move on to the demos. The first demo is going to be by Jonathan. He's going to talk about the architecture of the product page on the back office. So Joe, if you want to take over the screen.
Yeah, I'm gonna present my screen. So can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. The idea of this demo is to present to you the new architecture that we used for the product page, which is being remigrated with CQRS commands and all the late things that we implemented in all the forms and grids in the recently migrated pages in PrestaShop. So the whole page is still a work in progress. We still have a lot of integration to do on the back office for the front part. However, we made a lot of work regarding all the commands, and nearly all the commands are already implemented. The only one that are lacking are probably the one that we forgot about, and we will implement them when we will finish the integration. So the idea is that we had a lot of thought on how to improve the CQRS handlers, and lots of try and retry, and we finally are to a point when we think that we are close to the architecture that we want, and that will probably be used as a reference for the next page, which will be migrated. So to give you a little bit of context, so when we deal with CQRS command handler, each command represents a domain action like activate product, change name of products, and stuff like that. We had some issues because we want each handler to be independent so that they are not linked to each other. So basically, a command handler is not supposed to throw commands himself. Itself, and it's not either supposed to use another command handler inside its own code. So that's some mistake that we made in the past, and that's what we wanted to avoid in this migration. And when we realized that, we also saw that we had a little issue, is that all the domain logic of PrestaShop, so what makes the entity have their own domain logic, and what makes the intelligence of the shop was all in the handler. So the problem was that if we wanted to use this logic somewhere else, we were blocked because everything was in the handler and was not reusable. So I think I'm gonna have trouble to see the images as well, but I can explain while the image is loading. So basically, the problem we encountered was that we had some command handler that relied on other handler. So what we did in the past was to inject the sub handler and call it directly. The problem is that it creates a lot of dependency between the class themselves, and that's what we wanted to avoid. So I think the presentation will be available later. We can share it, I guess, if you want to see the image, but it's not that important anyway, it's just a piece of code. So what was our problem then is that handlers were codependent, which we did not want. So we could have duplicated the code to be sure that they don't depend on each other, but we didn't want to integrate some duplicated code either. And as I said before, all the domain logic was in the handlers, which was a problem because if we wanted to use it somewhere else, we couldn't. So that's what I just said. So the solution we came out with was to create domain services. So it represents an extra layer that we didn't have before because all the logic was already in the handler. The handlers go back to their initial purpose, which is only to act as some kind of proxies between the command and the domain logic. So you can see a handler as a controller, which job is mainly to pass the requests and to call the appropriate services. Basically, the handlers are doing kind of the same, but instead of passing some requests, they are using common inputs. So the advantage of this structure is that the domain services are used in the handlers, but they can be used anywhere else. So we started to think of a homogeneous architecture. The idea was that every handler and every piece of code would be built the same way. We wanted to have multiple small services rather than a big service that does everything. So the idea is to split the responsibility. This way the code is easier to maintain. And we thought about a little convention so that it's easier to find the code once you have a grasp of how it's built. The same convention of naming and namespaces and all will be the same everywhere. So it will be faster to find what you are looking for and what you need to modify. And to help us build those handlers faster, we wanted to have some abstract classes that would provide some small helpers so that we don't need to duplicate code and to redo the exact same thing for each new service. So the advantages of smaller services is that they are simpler to code because they are less complex. They are easier to understand because the code is shorter as well. The review is also much faster because once you have made a pull request review about such new commands, you get used to it. So the following ones, you know that, okay, the handler only does that. I focus mainly on the repository, on some part of the code, because I know which services has which responsibility. So it's a lot easier to review. And each service has an identified responsibility. So as I said before, It makes it easier to maintain, test, and it respects more the solid principle. So basically, here's a preview of how we are splitting the architecture. We mainly split all the services inside sub namespaces. So for each domain, here we are talking about the product domain, but the idea would be the same for any other entity in PrestaShop. You will have the command handler namespace, which contain all the handler classes. So this is the actual class that is at the top of the chain, which catch the command that has been sent to the command bus. Its only responsibility is to then call the appropriate services. Query handler are similar, but they are used to get some response from the model. But that's basically the same thing as a query handler and as a command handler. And the idea is also to split the responsibility and not only be used as a proxy. We have a validate namespace, which will contains all the validators. So the idea is, for now, we have mainly some simple validator that only validate field by field, like is it a string? Does it have the right number of characters? Does it respect the correct regapes or formats, stuff like that? Then we have the repository namespace. It's basically the classes that allow us to access the database. So to get an entity, to update it, to create it as well. And it's mainly all the chain between the domain logic and how we persist them in the database. And finally, because repository are quite basic, they are just read-write accesses. When we have more complex stuff to handle, because sometimes it's not just to get the fields from the command, put them on the entity and save them. You have to ensure that it's logical. Some changes in the field can impact another one or other entities. So for more complex updates, we have the update service, which will be really where we have some bigger domain logic, like computed prices or taxes, domain logic validation, like if I create this, isn't there another entity that has the same name, which is forbidden, and it's not a field by field logic, but it's more a more global validation. It will deal with this. It will deal with relationships between entities, basically associating a category to a product, for example. So that's the idea of all the updaters. So here I have a big schema which is supposed to show you how it is displayed, but it's gonna be hard if the image don't load. So I'm gonna see if I can open it in another tab, or maybe just show you the image. Do you see the image here?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, great. So here is a representation of the workflow that happened from the controller to the handler. And the idea is to show you all the layers that we implemented and what is the responsibility of each one. So when we start with the simple action, like updated the name of a product form, on the product layer, the product controller jobs is mainly to pass the request, create a command, and then just send it to the command bus, which will be called by the associated handler. So here we would have a basic information handler. So what it will first do is it needs to get the product. So that's when it will use the product repository, which is responsible to get a product from a database. For now, most of our repository are still based on the legacy classes. So it was faster to implement them, and there is less BC break. But the idea is that in the future, they would be replaced by any other access to the database. It could be Doctrine, it could be something else. The idea is that all those parts can be replaced by better implementation in the future. So what would happen then is that if the product doesn't exist, it will show an exception that will be displayed by the controller. If it does, then the handler will get the piece of the product object, and then it can fill each field of the product with the data that was sent in the command. So when you see with the blue square, it actually represents the responsibility of each layer. So you can see that here the handler's job is actually really simple. It just get the data from command and put it into the product. Then it has to the repository to update it. So it's the repository which first asks the validator, is this new product valid? The validator will validate if each field is okay. And if it is, it will return true to, it will allow the repository to save. And finally, everything is saved and we can display the success in the controller. So the idea here is to show you that each layer has its own responsibility, which is correctly split. So product controller is only parsing, the handler is only to use the data from the command into an entity. The repository only gets a product from database and saves it, and the validator only validates. So splitting all these responsibilities allow us to have a more maintainable code. I'm going to show you another example, which is a little bit more complex, but not so much. So don't be scared because it's bigger. It's actually the same idea, except here we are dealing with set categories. So how do we assign some categories to a product? Basically, the idea is the same. We go through the product controller, which sends the command. The categories will get the products. And then the difference with the previous example is that actually you can see that the handler doesn't do much. Since it's a more complex issue, we have a product category updater service, which is responsible for complex modification, like associating all the categories. So it will just call this service, and it's now the updater responsibility to perform the modification. So it will validate the categories exist before it assigns them, update the product, and finally it needs to update on the product itself what is its default category based on the new categories that it assigned. And to do this, it will ask the product category. So we have the same chain of action that we had previously, actually. This piece of responsibility was the same in the previous. So we have an extra layer here, which might seem more complex, but since every layer has a defined responsibility, it's actually easier to understand what it must do, and it's also much faster to review because you can really review piece by piece of code. So that's basically the architecture that we are implementing. We'll only finish with a small display on how all this. So basically here it's just to show you that how the services are integrated with each other. The common handler would be the big container, and it relies on some repository services which themselves use the validator. Sometimes in much complex cases, you would have an updater service on top of the repository to handle more complex business logic. And the job of the command handler is simply to parse the command into parameter and to dispatch them to the appropriate services or the domain entity. So you can already see what it looks like on the develop branch. We already have migrated a few commands, almost all of them for product pages, as I was saying, are available. I don't know. Do you see the image here?
Yes.
Yeah. So all the different splitting in namespace that I mentioned for product page, so the command handler, the updater, repository, validate, you will find the same architecture in subdomains like customization, feature value, and hopefully in the future we will keep maintaining all the other handlers this way. So as I said, once you're used to it, you can find really easily where is which repository, which is a help for developers when they want to add some new feature or to fix some bug. And we'll just finish this with I will show you a little piece of code. I talked earlier about the abstract classes that we have introduced to allow us to code faster. So you will find an abstract model repository, which is used for all the repository that we use. It's based on the legacy classes, as I said, and it's simply provide you some little helper. So the idea is just we have these get object model classes.
Can you please zoom a little bit so people can...
Yes.
Yes.
Does this work? No. This way?
Great.
Perfect.
Great. So internally, it's quite simple. It's just a dynamic function with parameter, which gets the legacy class, and it's embedded in some try-catch code so that we can have some domain exception and not the old core exception. And in the end, when you use it, it's quite simple. You just give it the field value, which class you are expecting, and this is the exception that will be triggered if it is not found. So all our repositories actually look like this. So when we review them, we don't need to pay much attention to it because it's become always the same thing. You have a bunch of helper method. We had get object model, but you have the same principle with add an object, update an object, delete an object. We also have some soft delete for the entities that handle it, which is only trigger a boolean in the database, but the data is not lost. And if you go into the abstract, you will find some other like asset that an object exists and stuff like that. And also partial update, because in the product page, we build all our commands for subdomain in the product. So the idea is not to update the whole object every time, but only the field that were modified. So this partial update helps us a lot in that spirit. And just quickly, you will have the same principle for the validator, which also provides some helper function. So you just saying him which field it is supposed to validate and the appropriate exception when the validation is incorrect. And behind the scene, it actually used the legacy method validate field. So it's the same validation that was used for years for object models. So you shouldn't be lost on that. So that's it for me. I hope it will make it clear. The architecture may move a little until we are finished to develop the page, but I think we are pretty much to the final thing. And anyway, all will be documented in the dev docs so that you can have some extra info and basically some better schematics than the one I show you. And that's all for me. And if anyone has any question.
Well, we do have a question from the YouTube chat, which is which part in the schema, where are the hooks fired, where are the hooks being dispatched, so that modules can register to them and extend and customize the behavior?
So in the comments, we don't have much hooks for now. That's an issue that we need to go deeper. However, there are still some hooks internally in the object model, which because we use the object model, so all the update and save hooks will still be available. We plan to implement a module example, which will show you how can I integrate my module with this new product page. So it will be partly based on new hooks that we are going to add probably. And we are going to try to keep as much as possible the legacy hook or the former hook, so that the module don't stop working from day to another. But if you have some inputs on which hooks are really important for product module, don't hesitate to communicate them to us. And I guess we can open an issue that or an epic that will help us to list them so that we don't forget any of them. I hope that's an acceptable answer.
And also, I believe that we will have hooks for all the regular use cases where a module needs to modify the data submitted, need to modify to add an input inside form, and so all the services that you have presented, all of them are Symfony services. So all of them can be overwritten, decorated, or even replaced if needed. And as you said, there will be a demo module showing all of this.
Yeah, the idea of the demo module would be to show you how to extend a Symfony page with the modern way. But of course, we try to keep as much as possible the old hook available as well.
Okay, there's another question on YouTube. Are commands transactional if not called remotely? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what's written. So, if not called remote service like email web service, can you please explain a little better your question, Laurent? I didn't quite understand.
I think it's about how do you deal when you plug a module which needs to do something on an external service and the external service fails. So if you have transaction, you can commit transaction at the end or roll back. And do we have something similar? I believe.
I understand.
So transaction and a database, I guess.
Yeah, there are no transactions as of right now at PrestaShop because we use we have to be compatible with my ISAN. And actually, the way the database connection is handled does not support transaction as of right now. It is something that we would like to implement at some point, and even go further with event sourcing, so storing the events instead of modifying the state of the database. But of course, we are very, very far away from that right now. So yeah, the answer is no, it's not transactional. So if it fails completely. There's no retry.
Well, actually, with the product page, since we implemented some partial updates, if only a part of the code fails, other commands will theoretically be applied. So we will have an adapted feedback on the page to tell the user that this part was not saved, but the other, yes.
Well, I hope we answered the questions. Let's move forward. So Thomas,
Yes.
you're going to show us the second demo.
Yep.
You want to share your screen?
I'm gonna show my screen right. I think you can see it now. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about our journey to make the migration from PrestaShop 1.6, the latest 1.6 to PrestaShop 1.7.7. So a little bit of context about how to migrate PrestaShop. There is two official ways. The first one is by using the core files only. So there is a script available in the project that you can use to upgrade. But I won't go any into detail for this one because it's already documented on the dev docs. And that's not the subject of this demo. And the second method is by using the auto upgrade, also known as the one-click upgrade module. So the way the auto upgrade module works, when I'm talking about the actual upgrade process, not the rollback and backup. So the upgrading process can be split in 4 steps. The first one is the copy of the new file. Then comes the manual SQL queries. So yeah, queries and script. So you can see on the image on the right that you can have it's a custom feature we implemented. So we can have a mix of MySQL queries and PHP scripts. So you can see PHP comment in a specific syntax that will allow to call a PHP file. And then after that, the doctrine migration. And finally, the module upgrades. So those are the 4 steps, the main steps when performing a migration with the auto upgrade module. So there is some issues with those steps, and I will go into some details of it. The first issue is that the way files are copied is different if the version you're trying to migrate to is already released or not. Because when you're using the create release command to create a build of PrestaShop, at the end of this process, you'll have 2 files. The first one is the actual zip file containing the PrestaShop project that you can use to make your shop online. And the second file is an XML file, which contains every the MD5 checksum of every file contained in the zip file. And at the end of the release process, internally at PrestaShop, we have to push that XML file to a PrestaShop server, and then the auto upgrade process, the auto upgrade module can use this file to do some kind of a diff between the old files and the new one, and it will be able to know which file is useless and must be deleted. So let's say in PrestaShop 1.6, you have one front controller that has been moved to a new folder in 1.7.7. If the XML is not used, at the end of the upgrade, you'll have 2 controllers the same. So the old one that is useless now and the new one. And that can be a problem because depending on the file system you're using, PrestaShop will use either one or the other controller, and maybe the old one is not working well with the latest version, and so it will break the shop. So a little trick we can do to try to be as close as possible to what will really happen when the release will be finished is by setting in the field you can see on the right, when we try to do a really when we try to test an upgrade from an older version to a build, we use the archive channel. And when using this, we have 2 fields to complete. The first one is which zip to use, and the second one is what version would it be. And so, as you can see here, the trick is to put the latest 1.7.7.2, but in the version we are setting 1.7.7.1. So then the auto upgrade module will be able to use the XML related to 1.7.7.1 and delete most of the useless files. But that's not completely working because maybe in 1.7.7.2 you have new files that are useless and should be deleted and won't be deleted. But most of them will be. And for the remaining issues, if there is some, we can easily see if those remaining issues will be solved when the XML will be actually published. But that's not the ideal solution. The ideal solution would be to be able to manually put the XML file so the auto upgrade can use it directly. So that's something that will be coming in a future version of the auto upgrade. Next, the biggest problem we had was on this part when trying to migrate from 1.6 to 1.7.7 is that the script we use, as I show you before, between two SQL queries, they are using some of the scripts are using the core classes and entities before the doctrine migration happens. So maybe those entities are expecting a new field that is not already there in the database because the doctrine migration didn't happen yet. So if this is the case, then the script used to make the migration will fail. So the solution we implemented to make it work for 177 was to manually add new SQL queries to add those missing fields before the migration, the doctrine migration, and before the script is used. But this is far from ideal because this is very time consuming and you probably have to do it again for every new version to be released. So this is very not reliable. The optimal solution would be to not mix, so first not mix manual upgrades and doctrine. So choose one or the other, but not mix the two. And mostly try to not be dependent on the core classes and entities. So this is something we plan to do, and that will be coming as well in the coming month. And finally, the last problem we had with the upgrade was about the native modules. Because when you're doing an upgrade to a major version of PrestaShop, the non-native modules are all disabled, which is a good thing, but native modules are not. So if you come from 1.6 shop, you have 1.6 modules, native modules. After the migration, you'll have the 1.7 shop, the 1.7 native module, and some 1.6 native modules as well, but some of them were not compatible with the 1.7. But those incompatible native module, all of them have 1.7 equivalent. So to fix the problem, what we had to do is to implement the uninstalling 1.6 version of the equivalent of the 1.7 module. I don't know if I'm very clear about that. I could answer, if you have questions about it, I could answer them later. But yeah, there were, I think, 6 modules that were causing problems and broke the front office and the back office of the shop. So by installing them during the migration, when installing the 1.7 version equivalent module, it solves the main problem. There is still some not completely compatible 1.6 module with 1.7, so we'll have to implement that later. But right now it's working. So that was the main issue with native modules. And for every of these issues, the main problem is that we knew about it very late. We had no clue that the migration wasn't working. And that was because we were testing the upgrade process only when a new pair was made on the auto upgrade module. So if no pair was made on the auto upgrade module, no tests were performed on the auto upgrade. And in addition to that, the upgrade test was performed on the latest already published released version of PrestaShop. So we didn't know that the version we were working on was failing when migrating. And we knew it only when the release process started. So it's so late, it's way too late on the release process, on the life cycle of a release. So we had no time to fix all the issue we discovered when performing tests during the release process. So what we have done is that now every night we are testing the upgrade with the latest nightlies, so the 177X and the develop branch. And we are publishing the result of those tests of upgrade to the nightly board. So if I go on the nightly board, now, and I can filter the campaign with auto upgrade, we can see that we have 177X that pass and develop that doesn't pass. So it means that as of today, we already know that the 178 version is not working with the auto upgrade process. That's way earlier than before, and so we'll have the time to fix it, to fix the issue before the 178 is released. And that's the biggest improvement we have on the auto upgrade module. And yes, that's pretty much it about the journey to make the 1.6 module, the 1.6 version of PrestaShop working with 177.
Thank you, Thomas. Really, a really great presentation. I'm so happy that we are going to start testing upgrades on nightlies. It's been such a problem for so long now. So being able to identify as soon as possible whenever we merge something that breaks something is the whole point of having native builds, and having this with upgrades as well is just fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm so happy about that. Let's see if we have some questions. Maybe somebody on Jitsi or on YouTube. YouTube, it's a little bit late, and there's a small delay on YouTube, so maybe we can wait a little bit. Is there someone in the room who has any questions?
I have a quick question about the nightly test. So it only tests the upgrade from 1.6 to the latest version.
No, actually, I think I'm not even sure now, but I think it tests the latest 1.6 and the latest 1.76, I think. But
Okay.
we can add we can add pretty much everything we want. So it's just a cron that runs every night, and we can add more tests, and it's not a problem.
Is it possible to also have the same thing but with 171, 172, and all the intermediate, all the minor versions of 1.7?
Instead of the nightlies?
No, in the nightlies, but
not
definitely. Just from 1.6, but from 1.74 and other versions as well, which may have different issues sometimes.
Exactly. Yes, we can do whatever we want now. It's just a GitHub Action configuration. It's really easy to add. So we can do this.
Okay. So it's just a matter of bandwidth on Google Cloud, I guess.
Yeah.
A matter of budget.
I have a question about the models in 1.6 and when you migrate to 1.7. So you suggest that you disinstall, install the models and then install the new version of them with 1.7. So my question, if there is a possibility in the future, we may upgrade our shop without going with this process. Because as a merchant, it's really painful to, how is it that, to place the database from 1.6 of these models to migrate it to the shop 1.7.
I'm not sure to fully understand the question, but the goal of what we've done is that we are replacing the old modules that are not compatible with 1.7 anymore with their newest version, fully compatible with 1.7. So at the end, it should not be a problem for the merchant because it will be completely transparent for him, that he will not know that node module has been replaced by a newer one. So I don't know if I answer your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And I think each module should be responsible of migrating its data. They are
Exactly.
present in the 1.6, and it should copy them in your tables or adapt them.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's happening right now.
And I was like Pablo's right. We were discussing in the chat, but people cannot see this. But each of these modules is making sure that it takes the data from the 1.6 module and migrate it for the 1.7 version. So actually, when the merchant open his new shop after the migration, all of this data is already converted for the new format, and the 1.7 module is configured as the 1.6 module was configured. So when everything goes right, he has nothing to do.
Yeah.
And this is why this work has to be done for each module, because each module might have some slight changes between modules and have this dedicated configuration to migrate. So that's a very big work.
Yeah, so maybe this part is missing in some of the modules, I guess.
Yeah, still, but not the module that are not being migrated yet are not breaking the shop. So that's the main thing.
Yeah, thank you guys.
There's another question in the chat. If I might say, he's saying, what are the checks to be sure the upgrade was successful?
On the nightly board, you can see like other tests. There is a section about the auto upgrade process, and it will be red if it's not working, and it will be green if it's working. And if it's red, if you go on the detail, you can see the URL of the test that failed, and you can go there and see what happens.
But is it like a full-on it worked or it didn't work at all, or do we have a series of checks that we can follow, like this thing is working, this thing is working, this one is not?
It's more binary. It's more that it does work or it doesn't work, and also the upgrade and the rollback are tested. So if either one of the other are failing, that will be noticed in the nightly board, and then you can look in the test where it failed, because you have the log.
But we're just checking that the process ended up successfully, not the shop is working fine afterwards.
For now, no, we just check that the shop returned 200, but I think we plan to add some UI automated tests at the end to be sure that the work is actually working. The shop is actually working. Sorry.
Yeah, at least the sanity test maybe, which can be run quite quickly.
Exactly.
Another question, can we check the login to PrestaShop /admin dev/auto-upgrade/tmp?
Yeah, but that's useful when you are doing the upgrade manually on your side. But when it's automated, you will not have access to this file. But those logs are still displayed during the process when the migration happens. You have those work displayed, and you can see them on the GitHub action.
Okay, we don't seem to have any more questions. Anyway, don't hesitate to join us on Slack afterwards if you want to. We're always there. Maybe we don't answer to every message, but we read them all, I think, at least most of us. So thank you very much, everybody, to have joined us for this first live demo. We hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that our demos are going to get even better in the future. Those ones were just great, but I hope that we are going to have some from people from the community afterwards. It would be very nice. So let's just say see you again in a month. And have a nice day, everybody.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.